Leslie's dream project hits a snag. Bill and Anita face a dilemma, and Keel makes a risky decision. The spoilers for the episode Beyond the Gates airing Wednesday, March 18th, focus on Leslie's house renovation project being suspended. This puts her at odds with Vernon Dupree. In another development, Keel makes a surprising move, while Bill and Anita have a difficult argument. Key points to remember. Leslie's house renovation is abruptly halted, putting her in direct conflict with Vernon Dupree. Bill and Anita sit down for a difficult, potentially emotional conversation. Keel makes a surprising move as he tries to mend his relationship with Nicole. Jody blesses Vanessa while she receives some much-needed advice. Of course, and with the plot points you provided, this story has far too much combustible material not to explode into an intensely tense, razor-sharp, deeply threatening storyline. Not every noise in Fairmont Crest comes from drills, hammers, or half-finished walls. There are other sounds far more terrifying than that: the sound of secrets being shifted, of pride being wounded, of families that seem unshakable but can crack from within if the right accusation lands in the right place. And this time, when Leslie is forced to halt the construction project she has stubbornly pursued for months, the issue is no longer just a neighborhood dispute or an irritating legal complaint. This is the moment when real motives begin to show. This is the point where a woman who has never known how to step back will be pushed into choosing between losing control or becoming ruthless enough to drag all of Fairmont Crest down with her. Polished surfaces will split open, suppressed anger will finally find a reason to erupt, and the people who once believed they were still thinking clearly will realize that in a community like this, silence is sometimes nothing more than a thin shell covering a psychological war preparing to turn bloody. Leslie is not the kind of woman who becomes furious simply because a construction project has been suspended. If it were only about money, inconvenience, or wounded pride, she would never have clung to that house with such an almost pathological obsession. There is something darker behind Leslie's stubbornness, a motive that makes every day of delay feel like a thread hanging around her neck. That house stopped being a home long ago. It is no longer a symbol of a new beginning or a social victory. It feels more like a fortress being built in desperation, a place Leslie needs to complete before anyone looks too closely at the blueprint, at the quiet alterations, at the sections concealed far more carefully than necessary. To outsiders, the prolonged construction is proof of her chaos and incompetence. But in Leslie's mind, every brick that is prevented from being laid is a sign that she is running out of time to hide something that can never be allowed into the light. It is fear of exposure, not ordinary resentment, that has made her this vicious. The noise from the construction has become a form of endless torture for Anita, especially at a time when she needs peace more than ever. Fairmont Crest was supposed to be the kind of place people paid for elegance, control, and a sense of safety wrapped in wealth. But Leslie has turned everything into a drawn-out campaign of disruption, as if the noise itself has become a weapon. Vernon watches all of it with the cold anger of a man who does not tolerate being provoked on his own ground. He understands perfectly well that Leslie is not the sort of woman who does anything by accident. To him, a project dragging on for months is no longer bad luck or mismanagement. It is a form of deliberate psychological pressure. And as Anita grows more in need of protection from that chaos, Vernon decides he will not keep watching in silence. He asks Bill to step in, not only because Bill is good with the law, but because Bill understands how to shift power in situations where appearances must remain spotless. It is the kind of move that makes no noise at all and yet is more than capable of suffocating an opponent through the very system they thought they could outmaneuver. Bill finds the real loophole, and that is the moment Leslie feels the thing she hates most surge through her, the sensation of being stopped by people who are more experienced, more discreet, and more dangerous than she is. The suspension of the project is not just a setback to Leslie, it is humiliation. It tells her that Vernon is still powerful enough to touch her life whenever he chooses. It tells her that Bill can still tip the balance of power in favor of the Dupree family. It tells her that Fairmont Crest has never truly allowed her inside as an equal. The anger in Leslie does not erupt into panic. It hardens into something colder, sharper, and more poisonous. She is not the kind of woman who screams and collapses. She is the kind who goes quiet just long enough to figure out what lie could break a family from the inside. What makes Vernon especially dangerous is that he is not acting only for Anita. On the surface, his motive is obvious enough, protecting the woman he loves from the torment of the constant noise. But beneath that, he also senses that something is deeply wrong with Leslie. He has lived long enough to know that some construction projects are rushed toward completion not because of ambition, but because of fear. Maybe Vernon does not have hard proof yet, but his instincts are already speaking to him. He is not only stopping the noise. He is trying to stop Leslie's momentum before she finished something that could have devastating consequences for the entire community. That is why this confrontation will be different from the last time when Leslie fabricated a story about Vernon's affair with Sharon just to stain his reputation. This time Leslie will understand that her old provocations no longer carry enough force. If she wants Vernon to back down, she needs a larger bomb, an accusation powerful enough not merely to anger him, but to make the entire Dupree family turn on one another. And then Peaches appears at exactly the right moment, like a shadow hovering between loyalty and instability. Outsiders might see Peaches as nothing more than a devoted ally, someone always willing to carry Leslie's secrets. But in truth, her presence feels like an unexploded device with no clear direction. Peaches knows too much, has heard too much, has witnessed too much. Leslie uses her like an extended arm, but that is precisely what makes their relationship so dangerous. An ally who knows the full depth of your darkness is never truly a safe asset. As Leslie begins considering a lie strong enough to tear apart the Dupree family, Peaches becomes indispensable, but also the one person who could send everything off course if fear, greed, or the sudden realization that she is only a disposable tool ever takes hold. Leslie understands perfectly well that the strongest blow is never struck in court, but in trust. Lawsuits can be irritating, prolonged, and media-heavy, but a family like the Dupris is wealthy enough, smart enough, and seasoned enough to survive legal attacks. What they do not withstand as easily is suspicion born inside their own home. So Leslie begins leaning towards something crueler. She considers starting a rumor that Vernon not only betrayed Anita once, but used family money to conceal that relationship for years. Then she realizes even that may not be enough. In the world of Fairmont Crest, infidelity is a stain, but not necessarily an explosion. What could truly shake the foundation is a hidden child, a secret heir, proof that wealth, power, and family history may have been bent out of shape for years. If Leslie plants the right seed of suspicion, she knows the questions will grow on their own. Who knew first? Who kept it hidden? Who benefited? And who has really been betrayed all these years? If Leslie unleashes that lie, the first people pulled into suspicion may not be Vernon's enemies, but the people closest to him. Anita would be thrown into a fog of pain and wounded pride. The children would not know whether to defend their father or investigate every suspicious silence from the past. Old conflicts would be excavated. Details once dismissed would suddenly become ominous. A hesitant conversation years ago, a money transfer with no clear explanation, an unusual moment of silence, all of it could be reinterpreted in the darkest possible way. Leslie does not need to prove the whole story. She only needs to be clever enough to build a lie that feels plausible, detailed enough to sound real, poisonous enough that no one dares dismiss it completely. And if Peaches plays the role of someone who accidentally overheard a secret, accidentally saw a document, or accidentally connected Sharon to another name in the past, the lie becomes even more dangerous. It will not arrive like a direct accusation, but like the faint smell of smoke, the kind that becomes more unsettling the harder people try to wave it away. And yet, what makes Leslie both terrifying and tragic is that she is not retaliating out of hatred alone. She is protecting something inside that house, something that could destroy her if it is dragged into the light. Maybe it is a sealed room, a hidden archive, a financial tunnel, a place used to store papers, devices, evidence, or anything else that should not exist inside a normal home. She is not building that house in order to live peacefully. She is building it to lock away the past, or to prepare for a long war. That truth is what stains all of her actions with a layer of quiet panic. Her fear of exposure means she cannot retreat. And a person with no way back is often more dangerous than one who still has choices left. While Leslie prepares to blow Fairmont Crest apart with a fabricated story, Bill enters another battlefield entirely. One where every legal maneuver feels small compared with the weight of emotion and regret. The difficult conversation between Bill and Anita is not openly aggressive, but it is heavy in a way that makes the air feel almost unbreathable. Over the years, Bill has left too many scratches across his relationship with this family. He acted for too long like a man who believed control could save him from consequences, that cold decisions were always better than confronting emotional truth. But his declining health over the past year has cracked that shell. For the first time in a very long time, Bill understands what real helplessness feels like. He understands what it means to watch his own body, or his own fate, betray him and still be unable to command it back into obedience. So when he sits across from Anita, he is not just facing a mother figure who has always been able to see through his darker corners. He is facing a larger fear, that Anita may look at him and see every weakness, every selfish impulse, every failure he has tried to bury. That conversation may begin as an attempt at reconciliation, but the deeper it goes, the more it feels like a final boundary being drawn. Anita is no longer someone who can be softened by carefully polished explanations. At a time when her own health is becoming a serious question, dishonesty or half-truths are more intolerable than ever. Bill wants to help, wants to make amends, wants to prove that this time he truly cares about her peace. But his motives are not entirely pure. Part of him genuinely fears for Anita. Another part is desperately trying to be seen as someone who still matters, someone who still has value, someone who has not been cast outside the moral circle of this family. His fear of losing Anita may be tangled with an even deeper fear, that she will see straight through him and decide that all his remorse is just performance, that his core has never really changed. That feeling leaves Bill rigid and torn, pulled between honesty and self-protection. Between confessing what he knows and continuing to control the information in order to preserve his last remaining advantage. If Bill truly knows that Anita's condition is more serious than the rest of the family realizes, then this meeting becomes even more fateful. The moment one person holds knowledge about another person's health, the emotional balance of power changes immediately. Bill could choose silence in order to avoid making everything worse, but that silence could also be seen as betrayal. He could choose to tell the whole truth, but truth delivered too late can feel more like a knife than a release. Anita understands that. She does not need a man trembling under the weight of his guilt. She needs clarity. But clarity is exactly what Bill fears most, because once everything is spoken aloud, he will have nowhere left to hide behind his clever arguments. Elsewhere, Nicole is being dragged into a different kind of chaos, thick with wounded male pride and emotional calculation disguised as concern. Dr. Keel Rowlands crossed a line when he allowed his confrontation with Carlton to explode inside Nicole's office at the hospital. For Nicole, it was not simply an uncomfortable moment. It was proof that Keel was not placing her peace or dignity ahead of his own ego. When she says she needs time, it is really her way of keeping the situation from collapsing completely on the spot. On the surface, it sounds like space to reassess. But underneath, Nicole has already begun confronting a more painful question. Is Keel trying to save this relationship? Or is he simply trying to defeat Carlton in a competition she never wanted to become the prize for? Keel's next unexpected move, then, will decide not only the fate of the relationship, but reveal who he truly is. If it is a sincere apology, It will need to come with a lowering of pride, something men like Keel usually find much harder than performing a grand gesture. But it is also possible that the move will be an act of desperation, carefully staged to stir emotion, to force Nicole to see him as a man willing to fight for love. The problem is that Nicole no longer needs loud love. She needs peace. She needs to be placed ahead of someone's ego. She needs a man who does not turn her life into a stage on which to prove himself. That is why an oversized gesture could easily backfire. It may make Nicole feel cornered instead of cherished. Carlton, for his part, is not entirely innocent beneath his protective posture toward Nicole. His presence in the conflict makes one thing clear. He still has an emotional attachment to her, whether that means lingering love, protective instinct, or simply an unwillingness to let someone like Keel gain influence over her. That turns Nicole into the center of a triangle that is not just about romance, but about emotional power. Who truly understands her? Who genuinely wants her to be at peace? And who is simply using her to confirm his own place in the world? Nicole is beginning to realize that she is exhausted by men who speak of love while behaving as though victory is what they want most. And just as Nicole is already overwhelmed by Bill, Keel, and Carlton, Vanessa comes to her like a woman standing at the edge of collapse. Vanessa does not just need advice. More deeply, she needs somewhere safe to admit that her life is slipping away from the course she once believed she could control. The humiliation her daughter caused her in front of everyone at Uptown was not merely a public embarrassment. It cut into a much deeper wound, the realization that her choices are beginning to exact a price from the very people she loves. Her relationship with Joey may once have made Vanessa feel protected, desired, and elevated into a sphere of power not every woman gets to touch. But that power now comes with a cost to hide, to ignore. Suspicious eyes from society, quiet contempt, prestigious opportunities she has been forced to refuse, and worst of all, the growing coldness between her and her daughter. Does Vanessa love Joey? In some way, perhaps she does. But that feeling has become so entangled with other things that it is hard to separate it from the sensation of being protected, of standing beside a man who makes the world around him hesitate. Joey gives her a sense of safety in the most dangerous form possible, the kind of safety that only lasts as long as the woman accepts the loss of her reputation, her independence, and the principles that once helped her stand upright. The longer Vanessa stays with Joey, the more she resembles a woman wrapped in an expensive coat lined entirely with blades. The fact that she recently had to refuse a major honor is the clearest proof of all. No one turns away from the light unless they can feel the darkness gripping too tightly. And deep down, Vanessa knows that. She knows she is not simply living quietly because she wants peace. She is shrinking herself because she is afraid that too much light will reveal what this relationship is eroding inside her. Joey, meanwhile, appears with a gesture heavy with symbolism, offering blessings to an old friend. On the surface, it may look like the sign of a man releasing the past, maturing, softening. But with Joey, nothing should ever be read on one layer alone. A blessing from him could be closure, or it could be a strategic motion before he opens another round of the game. Joey is the kind of man who understands the value of image, who knows exactly when to lower his guard so others lower theirs, who knows how to preserve softness on the surface while continuing to calculate underneath. If Vanessa is still clear-eyed enough, she will have to ask herself whether she is standing beside a man who is changing, or beside a man who has simply perfected the art of hiding who he really is. What makes all of this even more frightening is that Vanessa's daughter's anger may not come only from hurt. Children raised around power often smell danger sooner than adults want to admit. Perhaps she sees something in Joey that Vanessa refuses to see. Perhaps she senses the control, the invisible strings, the price her mother is paying. If that is true, then that public rebellion was not merely personal humiliation. It was an alarm Vanessa no longer has any real way of pretending not to hear. Nicole stands in the middle of all these intersecting crises like a woman who has grown too accustomed to holding balance for everyone else while she herself is beginning to sway. She listens to Vanessa not from the position of judgment, but from the position of someone who understands that women are often pushed into calling survival inside a system of control by the name of love. But the advice Nicole may give will not be as simple as lead joy or follow your heart. She will force Vanessa to face the hardest question instead. Are you really seeking help? Or are you seeking forgiveness for a choice that deep down you already know is wrong? And once that question is asked, Vanessa will no longer be able to hide behind her own fragility. All of these storylines, from Leslie's fury, Vernon's quiet intervention, Bill's torment in front of Anita, Keel's desperate struggle over Nicole, to Vanessa's breathless unraveling beside Joey, are pushing Fairmont Crest toward an extremely dangerous moment. Because the most frightening thing is not who is lying to whom. The most frightening thing is that nearly everyone has a reason to do it. Leslie lies to survive, Vernon stays silent to protect. Bill hides the truth to preserve control and what little dignity he has left. Keel acts recklessly because he cannot bear to lose. Vanessa deceives herself because the alternative would mean collapse. Joey offers carefully timed softness to keep his darkness from becoming too visible. And Nicole, the one everyone turns to for steadiness, is the very person now facing the most painful question of all. When everyone wants to be saved, who still has the strength to save herself? If Leslie truly releases that lie about Vernon's secret child, the Dupree family will not just be humiliated, they will be broken at the root. If Bill tells the truth too late, whatever fragile trust remains will shatter. If Keel chooses a dramatic gesture, he may lose Nicole forever. If Vanessa continues clinging to the false safety Joey gives her, she will lose more than an honor or a peaceful dinner. And the most bitter part is that every one of these disasters is being fed by people who still tell themselves they are only doing what is necessary. In Fairmont Crest, no one is ever truly innocent once the war begins. Some strike the match through cruelty. Some pour oil through pride. Some stand by too long because they think they can still control the damage. But fire does not recognize innocence or guilt. It only knows how to spread. And the feeling growing stronger now is that this fire will not stop at a warning, a lawsuit, or a passing humiliation. It will burn through marriages, reputations, mother-daughter bonds, hidden health crises, locked rooms, and the hidden corners of each person they have spent years trying to keep buried. A noise that once seemed like nothing more than a nuisance to the neighbors is now becoming the opening signal of a ruthless psychological war. One in which a single well-timed lie could be enough to make the entire Dupris empire tremble. While women like Leslie stand ready to drag everyone down if that is the only way to keep whatever lies buried inside that house in the dark.